Well, hello everybody and welcome to tonight's show. Today's show, wherever you are, it's super cool to have you with us. This is episode 4. So we're cranking along now through these great episodes, and thanks for taking the time to join us. And as promised, we're continuing in this series our little mental health theme that we're continuing through all of our shows, and really looking forward to our interview we're going to have tonight with our guests, which we're going to announce real soon if you haven't heard. I've really enjoyed, to be honest, this little journey we've been on. Someone asked me recently how much I planned to do this all along. I never really planned to do this. It's kind of just been part of our journey that we've been on in the last year. And most of it's been talking about these particular issues that we're talking about on all these shows. And that's why it's very real, raw, and relevant. See, it all fits. Anyways, cool. So before we talk to our guest tonight, if you like what we're doing here on the show, you might know the drill already, but please keep doing it. I've got to get this right. Like, share, comment. Just keep doing it. Smash those like buttons. And if you really love it, then smash the love button on the live show. It makes me feel good when it's all happening. I can see some people hitting the button now, which is really, really cool. I'm keen to say hello to a few people. Oh, look, there's Mike DeVita all the way from Whangarei. We've got Mark from Auckland, Chris and Karen from Auckland. It's basically the Auckland show tonight. You guys might need it more than everybody else because we're really bleeding for you guys, and can't wait to get to have whatever normal looks like with you as soon as possible. I think you'll all agree with that one and probably like that one. If you're wondering how you could support the show, it's nice and easy. We've created this thing a little while ago called Buy Me a Coffee. It's a nice play on words. If you go to Buy Me a Coffee, all one word, .com/Lockie. It gives you an opportunity for as little as $3 to support me and what we're doing in the show. And I'll post a link to that shortly after the show as well, if you want to catch that piece of paper disappear. Coming up next, we're going to be talking to Ken Youngson. Now, some of you might know him. He has a famous son who was in a famous rock band, but we're not going to talk about that tonight. We might share some comments on that later. And he's going to be talking about some really important aspects about an approach to life in general, which I think is probably going to help a whole lot of us. In the Zoom calls that I've had leading up to this interview, I learned so much from Ken. He's such a nice guy to talk to, so I think you're going to get something out of this. So first up, we're going to have a conversation. I've got some questions around this thing called time management, and whether time management is the best approach to life. That's a loaded question. You'll get that shortly. As I think most of us approach life, wishing we just simply had more of the stuff, that more time is the answer, but I've been wondering lately whether that's correct. The second thing we're wanting to cover is this whole thing of balance. Maybe you're like me and confused on some level about this thing we call work-life balance, this often mentioned but yet mysterious place we apparently all should desire to go and to find. In my research for this interview, I found this statement on the Employment NZ website. It goes like this: 69% of professionals in New Zealand state that the work-life balance, including flexible working, is their top priority when seeking a new role. So more than money, more than the title they're going to have, this whole elusive thing of work-life balance. And to be honest, I've been absolutely rubbish at it, and I have no idea what I'm doing in regards to it. And so that's another reason why I was really keen to talk to Ken about these things and wherever else this interview goes, because they tend to go off in some other cool directions as well. Now, hey, part of what you're supposed to do with YouTube and all that sort of stuff is you're supposed to give people a reason to stick around to the end. So, I'm learning from everybody else. So stick around to the end because I have a little show and tell fun thing for you. And plus you're going to find out what we've got planned for some upcoming shows. You're going to be the first to find out about it at this particular show. Enough of the intro. Let's roll the stinger and get on with the show. Well, joining me now on the Real, Raw and Relevant show, it's my pleasure to welcome Ken Youngson. Hello there, Ken.
Hi, Lockie. How you doing?
Good. So, bit of an introduction for those of you who don't know Ken. Number one, we have a shared love of guitar, so that's important. So that's actually the main reason for having you on the show. No, well, it does help. But he's actually, we met recently on Zoom via an acquaintance who recommended we have a chat, which I'm really pleased we have had. He's the CEO and co-founder of InnerFit, which we'll talk a little bit more about soon. But they have programs, I just grabbed this off your website, kind of a bit of a blurb. They have programs based on 3 core principles that enable individuals and teams to fulfill their potential. That sounds really, really good.
Well, I mean, that's what it's about. I mean, if we can't help people practically, then what can we do?
So the reason why I was keen to talk to you, and we've had a bit of a Zoom catch-up already, is just some areas that I'm really interested and fascinated from our other conversations, which are going to get in. And to be blunt, I'm probably going to be loaded questions like you already understand, because I want you to talk about what we've talked about. But so how did you get into InnerFit? Where did that all come from before we get into these questions?
How long have you got? It's a long story. I mean, I was working with the International Sports Coalition, an amazing group of people that are using sport as a context to really help people understand how to get the best out of life. Sport's just such a valuable context, really, for life itself, to really understand how things can work best. And I mean, my background was in athletics, and just loved that whole context. And it was at a conference in Greece the year before the Athenian Olympics. There was 160 nations at this conference, quite an amazing event, really. And we were building resources to help kids, especially around the world, learn about life through the context of sport. I mean, they've even used a lot of the resources. Remember the Bunday Archie tsunami? Well, they went into that area of the world and they used the resources to help kids learn how to laugh again. I mean, many of these kids had lost everything. I mean, parents, siblings. It's hard to understand just how tough it would have been. And these kids their laughter had gone. And so, they were using that sort of stuff. So, that was part of where we were kind of locked up in a hotel room for about a week, just writing resources and developing new material. And it was from that experience being in Greece, that I thought, gosh, we need something of this to deal with some of the changes that we are seeing in our culture. We were seeing too many athletes at the time with their contracts ripped up simply because they couldn't behave themselves off the field.
Right.
Quite talented on the field. I think, it's summed up by a great quote from one of the world's best coaches ever, Coach John Wooden. He says, talent will always get you to the top, but it's your character that'll keep you there. And so it was the character element. When you look at the rate of change in our world, where do you get that character development? In education, typically now, most of it's about creating human knowings with knowledge to become human doings that are economically productive in life. But that has to sit on the foundation of you as a human being. And that's at a deeper level. And so, in my day, gosh, you got dragged along to a local Sunday school and told to sit down there and listen to the lady, and you went to Boys Brigade or Boy Scouts or some other outfit that basically would teach you through outdoor activities or whatever about how to develop the sort of character and choices that were going to propel you to be your best self. Well, where do we get that now? YouTube? Because we just don't have any of those agencies working the way that they used to. I mean, you think about the Olympic movement. It was never about a massive festival of sport. It was about taking the context of sport to develop good people. So at InnerFit, we've used the same sort of principle to develop resources particularly for kids. It was Graham Henry that I was fortunate to have a conversation with, and he says, you've got to get this into primary schools because it's the only place that every New Zealander has to pass. Right. And so we went to work and started developing resources there. To give you an example, one that I love is the example of teaching kids about the importance of establishing goals in their life. And if you put a group of kids, even though they're young, on a netball court, so you're teaching them the fundamentals of the game, netball, to move into space, to pass, to balance, all of the fundamental movement skills that are required. But at the same time, halfway through a game, if you remove the goalposts and watch them just try and carry on, it's hilarious. Because they get to the point pretty quick where they realise it's pointless. There's no point to the game any longer. So you can't just play a game by throwing the ball around to each other and keeping it away from the opposition. It gets boring pretty quick. And so there you've created a teachable moment using that context. And they can dialogue on that later about that other game called life. So what would that feel like if there was no goal for you to actually fix your eyes on? And I think, then to develop that further and say, well, in netball, the other skill that you need is to defend, because if you don't defend your goal and the other team gets a point through, that's failure. It's not fatal and final, though. You don't chuck your toys and give up. You go back to the centre court, you line up in your positions and you go again. But what would it feel like, young man, if at some point in your life you'd failed to really defend the things that you should have, made a mistake, tripped up, whatever, and you had to start again, but there was no goal at the other end of your life for you to have purpose in life and aim at. So those are some of the examples that we use, and all of our content is riddled with that sort of, here is a context that you can engage physically, mentally, and emotionally with, and also relate to that other game called life, so that you're learning some of the fundamentals of life itself. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I think it's so important I suppose it's why we have in our culture focused for so long on getting kids involved in sport, because it's not just the sport at the end of the day. It's what you learn, the teamwork, and all those lessons that you've just been talking about. It's so powerful. So if people want to find out a bit more about what you guys do or get you involved, after the show, I'd encourage you to check out innerfit.nz. Great website, lots of links and information, bits and pieces there. So I've got some questions for you that I think kind of match what my agenda I have for the show. So the first one is this. We focus on encouraging people to live better with better time management. Is that the best approach? Loaded question.
Yeah, good one, Lockie. No, I mean, look, in a corporate career, and I mean, a lot of my background was in sales and marketing in the computer industry, and there was a constant push to do time management courses and studies, etc., so that you could jam more activity into time. And of late, we have seen a world that has sped up incredibly through technology and the likes. Time isn't the issue, in fact. It's the amount of energy that you have available to apply to a time slice. So, I mean, sadly, the moon is going to arrive tonight and it's going to go over the sky at the same rate of knots. You can't speed it up, slow it down, add anything to it. It's a fixed entity. The thing that isn't fixed is the available energy that as human beings we have to use within a time slice. And that's really a whole focus of ours that it's come out of working with high-performance sport, because you can be as talented as you like, you can run as fast as you like, but if there's no gas in the tank, nothing's going to happen. It's like having a flat car outside that's got all the gears ready to go, but if there's no juice in the tank for it to fire, or electricity this day and age, and the EV ain't going anywhere.
So that's actually really key, isn't it? You're talking about there is a difference between time management and energy management. And in my working career, I learnt that early on. I got a job working as a sales rep in Auckland, and I was handed a little diary that was made by Franklin Covey. I've never forgotten it. And it was all about organising yourself, and you had, what your diary was going to be for the day and your tasks, and you labelled them A1, A2, and then B1, B2, and all this sort of stuff. And the thing that I probably learned that I developed, my wife and I were talking about this the other day, I never ever finished my tasks. for the day, and the system is you just move them to the next day. But after year after year after year after year of never completing every task, you feel like you never actually complete anything. So I was ultimately organized time-wise, but I was never organized energy-wise. I was just so focused on got to get this task done, and it's so detrimental in the long run, would you say, to our mental health?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're such an integrated being. That's the way we're created. Now, I mean, energy, it comes in four well springs. So obviously, we tend to relate energy to the physical self. And that's the foundation of energy, really. I mean, if you're not looking after your nutrition, your hydration, if there's not the union of glucose and oxygen, then there's nothing for the muscles to fire on. There's nothing for your brain. The brain uses so much of our energy. I mean, it's about 2% of our body weight, but it uses a huge percentage of available oxygen and glucose type energy. And so, I mean, the second one that is probably not understood well enough in terms of the impact, we tend to think of it in mental health terms, and that is our emotions. There's energy in that area that, gosh, mate, if your emotions are low, even getting out of bed can be tough in the morning. And there's been some remarkable research around how emotional energy impacts our cognitive state, and that's the third element of energy, is our thinking. There's been some great research and work done in that area that profoundly impacts how well we're going to perform and do well in life. But I think the most impactful one that is really not that well understood in our culture today is spiritual energy. Now, we're not talking about your latest or favorite guru here. We're really talking about the energy of purpose. It's why are you on the planet? Take up space or add to the global warming issue? No, there's a purpose for being here. And when you really land on a clear purpose for your life, then the level of energy that drives down through the stack is unbelievable. My favorite question I love to ask people, and that is if God or your favorite guru or whoever you look to came and said to you, look, I can see you're a generous person at heart. So let me give you the ultimate gift of generosity. And that is that you can give every man, woman, and child on the planet one gift that comes from you, and it can be anything that you imagine, and I'll facilitate it. So you don't have to worry about that. Well, the question is then, what would you give them? That kind of drives deep to the core of who we are as human beings. And then once you've sort of pondered on that for a while, the second question that follows up is, okay, so how are you going to do it?
You're asking some pretty deep questions here.
Oh, Lockie, come on, man.
This is really good because I think part of what we've been trying to do with these shows is not just sit here, here's a quick fire answer to every issue that anyone ever faces, but get people thinking, having some conversation. So that's, again, one of the things I really appreciate what you're doing with me right now is actually just talking about this stuff. And at the end, I'm probably going to ask you a horrible question, so I'm going to just save that tension for you in a moment. But one thing that, gets thrown around this whole time management, energy management, all that sort of stuff is balance. And I've been reading some stats and stuff recently. Employment New Zealand website says that 69% of professionals in New Zealand state that work-life balance, including flexible working, is their top priority when seeking a new role. I don't think we used to talk like this. It used to be, when I was growing up, it's the best position and the best pay. That's basically what anyone ever talked about, wasn't it? So part of my concern, I suppose, when we talk about work-life balance is it seems nebulous and out there, and no one seems to really be able to nail down what that means. So I'm really curious, because you work in this field of helping people look at the side of their lives, sports and education. How on earth do you work out how this work-life balance is supposed to be? Like, is there a formula? Is there a way? Is there a model? How do you explain all that for us?
Yeah, I think, for many people, it seems to be the buzzword, and it's a bit of a mystery. I mean, I think to really get the work-life balance, it does come back to that spiritual aspect of who we are and to purpose. And it's for me, it comes right back down to to what are the values that you've chosen to live by. And sadly, few stop, in my opinion, to think about that. In fact, I was thinking about a group of young athletes that were in a high performance group some years ago that we worked with, and we were literally talking about this sort of subject. So I said, well, look, take a blank bit of paper out. I want you to write down your top 5 values that you've chosen to live your life by. I mean, these kids were, late teens, early 20s, and some of them literally have gone on to be Olympians.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I can think of 4 of them that were at the games in Tokyo. Well, I can tell you that out of 32 athletes, there were about 2 that could at least give me something. Most of them sat there just dazed saying, well, I've never really thought about it. So I think balance has to come back down to, so what are the things that you care most about in life that you want to live for? Otherwise, you will just live for anything. So there's I think we've lost the sight of true north. And true north is when we've settled some of these bigger issues rather than, I've got to make a living, I've got to get out of bed and go to work and work hard, and the boss needs this and that and the next thing. And it's just a merry-go-round. And it's not until you actually stop, I think, and take stock of your life and say, why am I here? What do I care most about? What are the things that I really want? In fact, I was talking to a chap the other day, and it's interesting because this guy is generous to a fault, and he's working his tail off for his kids and their households because they're all married and they've got children. Well, his place is in need of repair, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But he's doing that out of a sense of guilt because he lost balance when he was younger, and he worked every night of the week. He was working through the weekends and the likes and hardly saw his own kids or put any effort into them. So I think, we could talk a lot about balance. I think when I relate it to the athletic world, which is kind of a good context to think about, if you don't have balance, you destroy yourself. Like muscle, to get strength, has to be broken. There has to be stress. Stress in and of itself is not bad. And you can, the whole process is termed hypertrophy as opposed to atrophy. So hypertrophy, the building of strength and muscle. Atrophy, the decline of strength and muscle. So for hypertrophy to work, the first has to be load put on a muscle, and that takes seconds in the gym with the weight stack or whatever, and you pumping away, and it hurts. Basically, if you don't take that load off, you will destroy your muscle.
Mm.
I mean, it's just crazy. But here's the thing, to get it strong, you have to have recovery. And recovery takes it literally about 48 hours to really roll through. And what we typically do in life, if you want to think about that analogy from an emotional point of view or a mental point of view, if we're under stress, well, fine, that happens. Life's not easy and it's not all fair. But if you don't take the pressure off and have the balance of recovery, then you go into debt. And over time, if you do that with muscle, it's called overtraining, and you end up with physically breaking down. And I remember an athlete I used to train with, mentally tough. I mean, this guy could run 400 repetitions one after another and not even bat an eyelid. But mate, after a while of this sort of nonsense, he turned up, flu, boils, body just absolutely said, screw you, I've had enough, I'm toast.
Yeah.
And I think we do that with lack of balance emotionally, mentally. It really affects us physically. It affects us in terms of, lack of purpose, and you just don't want to get out of bed in the morning. So you have to have stress, but there's got to be recovery.
And that's something that's something that came out of a conversation I was having with someone yesterday, is they said what happens in your head first shows up in the body. You talked about there now about, what's going on in someone's head, then outworks into somebody. So they've got their illness, they've got the boils and bits and pieces, and how often we don't recognize what's going on in our bodies as a warning sign that something might not be going right in our head. We've separated the two, but they're linked. Would that be okay to say?
Oh, look, we are a very integrated being.
Mm.
And I think the danger in the Western world is that we tend to silo things.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And
Yeah.
that's not a good way of looking at it. We are very integrated. You can't overcook one area without affecting others. I think when you think about the whole cycle of hypertrophy, if you graft it, if you start with a baseline and then you put load on a muscle, so it weakens it, and then we've got to allow the graft to come up so that we come above the original baseline, and basically the muscle's going to say, you do that to me again and I'm going to be ready for you. I'll be a little bit stronger. But if you don't apply a sufficient recovery, then the thing just keeps going down and down. And we do that particularly emotionally, I think. When we're under load, if we don't allow the thing to recover, then we go again too soon and put more load on ourselves, and we go down deeper and come up a little bit more, don't recover properly, we go down even further. Well, by the time you've done that a few times and gone through a bit of a cycle there, you're talking about serious depression, you're talking about mental challenge, and you're talking about suicidal tendencies way down the pipe a bit if you haven't paid attention to this.
So I was actually reading, as researching our interview here, looking at different, journals and bits and pieces about balance, time versus stress management, because I knew we're going energy management. And I was actually interested to see on the Roche.com website, just to reference them. So that's a big pharmaceutical business throughout the world. They talk about some of this, and they had about 5 different points, and one of them was know your peaks and troughs. So encouraging people on their staff to understand their peaks and troughs. Now, how often do we live our lives the complete opposite of that brilliant advice, and we go like, we think of ourselves like a car engine, and if a car engine has a certain capacity, we should be the most efficient way of running ourselves at full capacity. But you would never do that with a car engine. Just because your car can do 6,000 RPM doesn't mean you run at 6,000 RPM every day, because for a car engine, it's going to demise a whole lot quicker than if you let the engine have its peaks and troughs. And I guess that's part of my concern, is that we spend so much time trying to get more out of ourselves, to achieve more, not realizing that's ultimately a fool's paradise. You never actually get there. You end up just wrecking yourself. So I'm keen for people to go away from this going, okay, so I'm going to not just focus on my time management, and I'm going to look at my energy management and trying to get some balance. Yeah. So to help wrap this all up and to come into land, this might be the horrible question that I said I was going to ask. What would be the best and little quick advice you'd give to someone right now watching this or listening to it going, yep, I need to deal with this? What would be the first thing that they should do, as opposed to trying to change everything in 5 seconds?
Yeah, okay. So the first thing is that there is hope that you can change. We have 2 gifts in life, in my view. One is you get time on the planet, and the other is you get to choose. And you can actually make the choice to change. And the key to that is working with somebody alongside of you through that journey of change. Trying to do it by yourself, pretty futile. There's a lot of self-help books out there, but very few people get help without being in relationship with somebody or a group of people that will help you. The second thing is then just to choose one thing to work on at a time and make a commitment to yourself. Now, commitment needs to be incredibly specific. So specificity is important. And that means that in fact, we use a tool called a commitment card to help this process, where you'll define what it is that you're seeking to change, and then what it is that you're going to do to work through the change process, because it takes work. In fact, we have a delightful little saying that basically says that information and inspiration without the perspiration will leave you with constipation. So all bunged up with ideas and no place to go. There has to be the work that goes in. And it needs to be incredibly specific. So it needs to be at 5:02 every night, I'm going to do this. And then I create a ritual and a routine. Routine's incredibly important when it comes to actually dealing with stuff in our lives and bringing change. If you don't have that plan down in place, and then if you don't have the accountability, or in fact, I find that word is misconstrued and misunderstood. So I would tend to use the word, what feedback do you need to make sure you stay on target with your change? If you don't have that feedback loop coming at you, we'll forget and we get distracted. And I was in a gym, to give you an example, some years ago, went back to the house of torture, and because I'd wrecked my back as a young pole vaulter after breaking a couple of pole vault poles, and that's another story. But my back was quite weak and my abs were very weak. And so the guy I was working with was brilliant. I just couldn't do ab crunches with the back the way that it was. So we had a different technique we were using to strengthen the abs. And he would roll up a towel, put it underneath my back, and say, pin it to the floor, and I'll tug on it, and you'll feel it. That's biofeedback. Brilliant. I could feel that, and it kept me conscious of the change that I was trying to work through. That's the sort of thing that you need, not biofeedback, but you need the feedback to keep you on track with change. So pick one thing. Make sure you've got a very specific plan, and it's got to be detailed. It's got to be down to on what day, at what time, and what activity is it that you are going to do to bring change. And that way, I guarantee you that within 60 to 90 days, if you repeat that, what happens is neurologically, you change the pathway in your brain. And that works. There's plenty of research around that. I think the other thing, that little tip that I'd chuck in here, we've probably heard of circadian rhythms, the rhythm of day and night, of rest and sleep. And we wreck that in our modern age enough. But there's another rhythm that science has really pinned down called ultradian rhythms. And ultradian rhythms are a key thing for us to think about and work with throughout the process of a work day. And basically the rhythm is in about a 60 to 90 minute cycle where you've got energy that you'll hit a peak and then you'll drop off.
Right.
And if you don't stop and take a break at that point before you go into the next cycle, what tends to happen is that you go into debt, and you end up going to work, getting into a task, you get to your peak, and you just keep going flat out. And what happens is your productivity goes through the floor. By the end of the day, you go, oh, what did I achieve?
This is great. This is so good. I really appreciate all your different insights you've been able to give us today. Again, if you've just tuned in on what we're talking about, we've been talking to Ken Youngson from InnerFit. You can get a hold of him and the work that they do at innerfit.nz, their website, so I encourage you to check that out. Hey, Ken, that's all the time we really got. I'd love to talk to you some more, but thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate you talking about these issues that we were talking about in regards to time management and energy management and balance. It's a real pleasure to have you, so thank you so much.
Thanks, mate. Great to see you.
Well, I hope you gained a whole lot from that conversation with Ken Youngson. There's so much to take in, and as we talked about on last week's show, I encourage you, not because it gets my views up, I'm not interested in that. If you want to rewatch the show, take some notes. I've been making notes. You should see my notepads in front of me. Just talking with these different people and things that I can apply to my life that aren't big or onerous, but could actually really help me in my mental health. And I really hope and pray they'll help you. So grab those hints, grab some tips, give something a go and see what happens. So you might be wondering what also we have on some upcoming shows. We are going to talk about something that I think is kind of important if you're wanting to get some help with your mental health, and how do you actually find a counsellor? How does that work? Because I'm wondering whether there's a bunch of people who don't ask for help because you're scared out of your wits on who you should approach, how that's supposed to work. What is it like when you first go to a counsellor? What should you expect? I know the very first time I went to one years ago, I had a supervisory counsellor who lived on the North Shore of Auckland. I still can remember driving there thinking, what are we going to talk about? And he was just fantastic. So I've got a special guest coming up to help with that. And one of the questions that's come up a lot for me over the years in regards to mental health is this one: should we medicate? For some people, they hate the idea. For others, they think it's the best idea. I wanted to find someone who has some expertise in the area. So we've got someone lined up who has a degree in psychology and understands what's going on in regards to what's available today, in regards to mental health and medication that could help you as part of your healing and recovery. So looking forward to bringing that to you very, very soon. We should be making some announcements about that in the next couple of days. And we've been getting some great correspondence and people wanting to make suggestions about the show, which I encourage you to do. And many of you are asked to tackle some even more contentious, more real, raw and relevant topics. One that's come out the most is people want me to do a show on vaccines and COVID. I've been freaking out about that. Well, that's a bit over the top. I'm concerned that we do that well. And so I've been doing some work behind the scenes. I've hopefully tracked down someone who used to work in vaccine manufacture because I have some very serious questions I want to ask about that. I want to do our best to approach the topic really well. It's not just, I don't want us to get wound up. For people to be pro and con either way. I want us to learn something together about a very raw topic. So if you'd like to get in touch privately with us with a question and maybe a suggestion about what we can do on the show in regards to mental health or any other topic that is real, raw and relevant to you and me, send a private message via this Facebook page, or you can email me directly on Lockie@temporalproductions, all one word, .nz. I'd love to hear from you. So if you've stuck around to the end, I did promise a little bit of fun show and tell. Some of you have been wondering, why I wear so many hats? It's because I got a perm. No, it's not because I got a perm. A number of years ago, I went through a phase and I grew my hair really long, which is a whole big story about me trying to figure out who I was, because it's such an important issue for all of us. And then eventually I cut it all off as a fundraiser, and I've had it like a number 1 or a 0 ever since. The best, worst kept secret is this, for some of you wanting to know. I've started growing my hair back. Some of it isn't looking so filled in, but that is the thing I was encouraging to stick around. You might be going, is that it? Well, I'm really sorry, but it's been a big deal for me, and making a little change like that in my life. It probably came out of the fact that I wasn't going to a barber or anything during the total lockdown, and I've kind of just carried on. So I'm doing it just to see where it goes, and I'm not asking you to vote on whether you should think I should grow it or not grow it. That's all okay. Hey, and I know that someone else by the name of Mike really wants me to share the secrets on how to make a good burger. We're working on that. Honestly, I'm working on a video on how to make the best burger, because burgers are good for your mental health. You heard it here first. We make burgers at home. I love creating those for me, and especially for Alex, because he loves a good burger with his dad. So that's really cool. Hey, enough of that. I've been talking for way too long. I really appreciated your time hanging out with us. Special thanks again to our guest today, Ken Youngson. Check them out at innerfit.nz. Thanks for joining us for episode 4 of the Real, Raw and Relevant Show. Hope this has brought some measure of hope and difference to your life. Please look after yourself, and see you real soon.